Everybody, Michael McIntyre here at the Next Level Podcast, broadcasting to you live from Dallas, Texas, here on McIntyre in Studio M. And man, we've got another 10 by 10 show here. Man, we've got us an entrepreneur extraordinaire, and we're happy to have him in studio. And we're going to be talking to him about all kinds of things, about Jesus, about entrepreneurship, about defining your past, about what's next in life. And he got to come to our MBA and he spoke and blew us away. And they're still talking about it. And so he's going to be on TED Talks soon. He's going to be on national TV and probably all over the place, because this guy is the bomb. So I want to introduce to me my good friend, my brother in Christ, Eric Vevang. Eric, say hi, everybody.
Hey, hope everyone's having a great day and wherever you're listening to this, and it's going to be awesome. I'm excited, Michael. I'm excited.
Man, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad we get to interview you. And man, I think I've known you probably for 5 years, is it?
Yeah. So, we came to Dallas 5.5 years ago, and it'll be 6 years from that point that we first met in the next couple of months. And of course, now I just moved back to Georgia, but yeah, so 5.5 years.
It's really cool. I'll never forget. I was over at Upper Room, and I know you guys you kind of were watching moments on Upper Room, and you guys got wrecked, and you said, we're going, I don't know who said it. Maybe Sarah said it, your wife, or you said it, or maybe one of your kids said it, said, let's go to Dallas. And man, you guys showed up. So I'm over in the coffee shop at Upper Room, and I think you guys were in some residency or doing some class or some school thing. And so Michael Miller, the senior pastor, came up to me and said, hey, he just came out from a meeting from your group, and he said, hey, there's this guy over there, man. His name's Eric Vevang. This guy, he's got this side company, and he made $2 million last year. He said, we got to talk to him. I said, great, man, let's talk to him. He sounds like my kind of cat. So that's how I was introduced to you. And then you came through Next Level Experience there at the church, and got to know you a lot better, and found out you had some daughters, and we had a lot in common. And the first thing that I noticed about you, Eric, was your heart, man, your passion. Where did that come from?
That's good. Yesterday, it's been tense. I've been moving. I'm in the middle of growing one company, like in the middle of massive growth. And then I'm in the middle of launching a company that's about to go live to the marketplace. And I was under tons of stress this last couple of weeks, and I felt like that steam kettle where I was about to blow. And yesterday morning I woke up, and I can't remember what triggered it, but I just started bawling in front of everybody, my wife, my kids. And it's always like this, it's like everyone kind of laughs at me when it happens because it's out of nowhere. But this question you're asking me, I was thinking about that a lot yesterday, because I was like, wow, why do I do that? And it really is, I just believe, like, tears and feeling and emotions can truly, they're like a gift from God. And so I think for me, just with my childhood, and I don't know how deep you want to go throughout the podcast about that, but I think I experienced a lot of traumatic events, and I think of course a lot of people do, and I still don't know the answer. But for me, bitterness wasn't something that I clung to a lot. And I found out later, as I became a Christian, that was a really great thing, right? Instead of becoming bitter, I just was sad. And so it's not hard for me to be sad. It's not hard for me to cry. It's not hard for me to trust, even when someone keeps wronging me. And I'll tell you, especially as I developed, like coping mechanisms and addictions later in life, I realized one of the best ways that I can be free and stay free is to stay open with my heart. Because if I start shutting off my heart and being in control, I just start feeling like I'm dying, and I don't like that feeling. I don't like that feeling. So I like to be open and honest. And
I love it. I think it's one of your attributes, and it's one of the things that makes you attractive. And I always tell people, vulnerability is the key. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. And Jesus was very vulnerable climbing up on that cross, and he didn't want to take that cup, but he did. And so and so there's been a lot of times you didn't want to take a cup either, but you did anyway. And that's one of the things that I really admire about you, Eric, and how you persevered. So, we've got a lot of people out there that listen to the podcast all over the country, all over the world. As a matter of fact, believe it or not, we're pretty big time in Pakistan and other places, but which is great. And I want you to share with people, because you haven't had it easy by any stretch. And I cannot wait till you get this book written, because you have got an extraordinary life. I look at you and I see the movie Pursuit of Happiness, right? Which I know you've seen. And that's a watered down version of your life, and excuse me, fighting this cold, but how you came through that and persevered with dignity and with grace. And it wasn't always easy. And I know you had a lot of ups and many downs, but the way you persevered. So I guess my question is, where does that perseverance come from? Because you've had it at a young age as well. I mean, even before you knew Jesus, but you had to persevere. Where do you feel that came in, Eric?
I have a good answer for that. And I think, because I've learned, right? I used to think that I was the only person, right, that had these traumatic things happen to me. But I realized the more you listen to people, pretty much all people, everyone has some sort of trauma. And I also learned not to rate people's trauma, because we're very much like, pain is, it's like your pain severity from your perspective can be just as bad as my pain. But then from the outside person looking at both, they could be like, oh no, his pain was way more. But it's not like that. Pain is pain. And I think for me, a lot of my pain just happened to be situations where I couldn't save myself from. So they started very early. One of the things that was really consistent in my life was being left alone from an early age. Mm-hmm. I was kind of one of those rare cases in the 80s where my mom was gone. A lot of dads were leaving homes, but mom had the kid. But in my life, it was opposite. My mom was gone with addictions, didn't want a child. And my father was raising me, and we were homeless most of the time from 0 to 6 years old. And so my dad was, big into the nightlife during those times, as was my mom. And so I spent more nights than I can count, probably in the thousands, being left alone in cars. So we would maybe sleep in a car, or I was living at his work in sheet metal factories and stuff like that. And he would leave, 9, 10 p.m. after I went to bed, and he wasn't back until 6, 7, 8 in the morning. So, and my dad admitted to my wife, there was sometimes where I was left in a crib, sometimes upwards of 24 to 36 hours. And now that I have children, I can't imagine, what kind of pain I was enduring. So to answer your question, I'm just a survivor. And I think a lot of us as survivors, I think perseverance isn't necessarily something that you self-discipline yourself into. I just think that you become a product of something. And for me, I was a product of surviving.
And I know I'm having an internet issue here, and I apologize. I had to text my
no worries
IT team. Anyways, I mean, Eric, product of surviving and going from day to day and being trapped in those situations that were crazy. I mean, crazy. All right. So at what age did you get saved?
18 or 17.
Okay. All right. And so you got into the side business later on. You became an entrepreneur, and am I frozen?
You were frozen, but I have you back now, just for a second. But I was hearing. Was
it? My question was, yeah, okay. Was it by accident you became an entrepreneur, or was it on purpose?
So twofold. I always kind of felt like I was going to be an entrepreneur. I always felt like I had it in me to make money. I always wanted to make money, right, and to make to become different than my parents. The way I actually became an entrepreneur was very much an accident. Yeah, and it was once again through adversity, things out of my control. Well, they were in my control, but kind of out of my control. I always tell people like my first real business where I was making a lot of money actually only happened because I got fired. Yeah, sure. I had businesses as a teenager. And even so, I like you could go back in my past and say, oh, yeah, he's going to be an entrepreneur one day. But when like the rubber met the road as a young adult, where I had to make that decision to venture into entrepreneurship, it was by force. Getting late, getting fired in 2008, 2009, going out thinking I could get a job and getting turned down everywhere I went.
It's a big deal.
And I had a mortgage, I was young and bought my first home, and dude, it was just by force. It's just a product of the situation, learning to survive, never giving up, and persevering. And
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and all right. And we've got a lot in common because we both were in the military, right? I was in the Air Force, you were in the Army.
Yes,
so
sir.
What prompted you to go? Because I love the story. What prompted you to join the Army?
Yeah. So for me, I was in the high school when September 11th happened. So it was like a thing. When September 11th happened, we, all the guys and, we're talking, and we were in school, and, just instantly in our spirit, we all just wanted to serve. So for me, that was most of it. The second thing is that I was getting by because I was very intelligent. So I could pass my tests, but I didn't. I was at school maybe half the time. I was screwing around. I was drinking. I had no chance of getting any kind of college scholarship. And also too, being raised by my grandparents. I was raised by my grandparents from like, I don't know, like maybe 6 years old to about 14. There's something about the way they raised me that they never once mentioned college. Like it was never spoken about in my house. Same thing you see with my grandpa went to college, but none of their kids went to college. And I asked them about it, my dad and his brothers, and it was never like mentioned as a possibility. So I never believed I could go. I never thought I could go. So I thought the military was my only option. Plus, of course, the desire to serve the country after what happened.
Sure. And so you join the Army, and how goes it?
It went fantastic at first. And I was super high speed. Like it was everything I ever wanted. It was actually like contained discipline that I needed. It was what I didn't have growing up at all. And I excelled. I was like the leader at a basic training, and I was put in charge towards the end. I forget what they called it now. Then I went to AIT, which was my schooling. And I did something that I wish, it's still my biggest regret. I signed up to be like a telephone networking switching analyst operator, which is just all fancy stuff for being like a phone guy. And so I got really bored. And then this is when my brokenness came out. So all that brokenness from my childhood, here I am by myself in the military. And I was just super alone, super abandoned, super alone, super immature. And so every time we got any kind of bit of free time on the weekends, I was trying to date, find a girlfriend. I just wanted relationship. And so then I ended up going back to Georgia. I was stationed at Fort Gordon, ended up staying way too late for a party. And I did about the worst thing you could ever do is I did some drugs on one of the weekends I was out, and drugs in the military do not mix, and lost track of time, came back late. And of course I got drug tested. And yeah, that started my process of just me having to confront some of those demons from my past. And so eventually got chaptered out. I still got an honorable discharge, got sent home. And that was like the beginning of the like volcano explosion of my pain. And of course, it kind of went downhill from there too after that.
Right. And so I know you had a really, really difficult childhood, and there's a lot of people out there listening right now that can relate to that, and and know the pain and suffering that you had to go through. But you got on the other side of that. You went in the military, which ended up being okay. But almost it wasn't though. But you had some favor. Your mother, what I remember from your story was your mom was never around except that one time, which helps you. Is that right?
Yeah. And so basically right before, in that middle of trying to decide if I was going to deal with the, failed drug test. And it's so weird, right? Like I was so immature. I was 17 when I went in. When I messed that up, it felt like my whole world, this was a new opportunity for me to be in the military, like a new fresh start. And when that happened, that mistake, it crushed me. And I actually like left. I went AWOL. And what's crazy about that is that, so when you're in a time of war, which since the global war on terrorism, we've basically been at war now for what, 20 years. But at that time, you know, I knew and everyone knew that like, hey, if you go AWOL during a time of war, that's punishable by death. And I was like, you know, what am I doing? But I could only make decisions like within a 24, I couldn't see the future. I was just so broken, and I wasn't saved yet, by the way, at this point. And so while I was AWOL, I went visiting all my buddies in college. So I went to all these different colleges. And of course, I was just getting smashed, you know, drinking myself into oblivion, finding like I think I was like internally trying to kill myself with drugs and alcohol. And then where my mom, it's really the first time in my life, my mom helped me in a major way was I was driving back to the base, I think, or I was thinking about driving back to the base, or I was driving to another college town, and I bought a 12 pack of beer, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to chug one after the other. And then on the way, on this highway, once I get drunk enough, I'm going to find me a pine tree and crash my truck into it. So this is like an idea I got. I'm like, it's over for me, because I didn't want to face the consequences of,
Right.
of going AWOL.
Right.
I was so scared of that. And so I got heavily into the pack. I've got my radio. I'm playing every depressing song you can think of. And I remember I would look at a tree and I would like, okay, like I was like trying to get the fortitude up to just do it. And every tree I'd actually start swerving to it. I was playing with the idea, and then I get back, oh, I can't do it. So I called my mom, just crying, telling her how I felt, what was going on. And she really right then was a mom. And she said, Eric, you've got, like, she was like forceful, but loving all in one moment. She's like, Eric, you've got to face this. You've got to go back and face this. And it's interesting, like, that's what I desired my whole life was discipline. I desired structure. I desired boundaries. I think we're all born with that desire, and I never had it. And so in that moment, I decided to go back, and I went back and I faced the music, and wow. So I walked in the door. It was like, hey, and of course all the drill sergeants turn around. They're like, oh, Private Vevang, you decided to join us. And so yeah, that was,
oh my God,
that was a pretty defining moment. And once again, though, now that I'm thinking about it, like where I'm at today at 37, having to go back on an army base after being AWOL for a week, like that's a pretty embarrassing moment.
Totally.
But that moment like carries over, right? So when I'm the only person out of 1,000 that'll do this one weird, crazy thing, I can look back on those moments like, hey, I did that. I didn't know, because you have to, when you go on a military base, you've got the guards, with the guns. And I'm like, are they going to arrest me as soon as I get through the gate? Are they going to like tackle me? Are they going to draw guns? Am I going to be locked up forever? Am I going to be executed on national? I was thinking all kinds of crazy stuff. So yeah. Wow. Pretty embarrassing. And even to talk about it's embarrassing, right? Because
I get it. I understand that. And I love your vulnerability in that. And so the military brought you back in, and they gave you an honorable discharge, though. Yes,
they did. Yeah. Because they told me, it was such a short amount of time. And I think they know, like, young people, like for me, it wasn't physical. It wasn't like intellectual. Like I was top of the class. I mean, you could talk to any of the drill sergeants. They would point me out. Like when we were in formation of 300 people, they would use me as an example of how to do the uniform. And on the PT test, I would excel. And but mentally and emotionally, I was a kid. Yeah. I was just so immature. And so they have room for that. That's kind of part of the filtering process, right? Yep. And so they're not going to punish me for life because of that. I was just mentally unfit. Yeah.
Well, that's a blessing. It's a different Air Force that I was brought up in, but that's a good thing that they did. Thank God for that. So, all right. So you get discharged from the military, and then, you get into the business. Now, your first business really you got to get into, wasn't it? By chance? Cause like, you were looking for a job, and some guy gave you a job and drive a backhoe, and you had no idea how to do a backhoe.
Yeah, so it was a bobcat. So some people would call it a skid steer. So yeah, I actually like worked for this guy, I think for a couple months when I first graduated high school, like on the weekends. And so he was the only connection I had when I got out. And so I ended up calling him. I go to work, and he's like, hey, be at my house at this certain time, or he would pick me up. And as soon as I get in the truck, he's like, hey, we have a situation. He's like, welcome to work. He's like, but our lead man, our foreman, did not show up today. And so you're going to be the guy to drive the Bobcat. You ever drove a Bobcat before? I'm like, no. He's like, okay, it's easy. I'll show you. I'm like, okay.
It's easy. It's easy.
And what's crazy about this, my very first day, and of course, this is like, you hear this preached about all the time, like how God's just going to, give you an opportunity. Well, like this thing happened to me, but it was so scary. We show up to this house, very nice house, downtown Atlanta. And we're meeting the owner builder. So this is one of those situations where like the owner of the home is the builder, he's the investor, and he's going to live in it. So this guy is like heart is in this home, and they had just dug the basement and poured the foundation walls. And because of that, there's like 2-3 foot of infill that needs to be done around the whole thing. And this property was so tight. And my job was to take this skid steer and just go all the way around, get a scoop of dirt, turn and dump. I mean, one touch of that wall and it bust. And now this is like $30,000, $40,000, $60,000 in damage. So my boss is like kind of being sneaky. He's like, listen, like, don't necessarily tell him this is your first day. Like you can do this. And so literally I remember and so he drops me off with the Bobcat. Boss is gone. Like he's gone. And I'm here with the homeowner, the investor, the guy whose heart's in this home. And I remember him being so nervous. Like he was like literally like just like watching me the whole time. But I'll tell you what, like we talked about at the thing we did, the conference, by the end of the day, I was an expert on the thing. And then it went from there.
Nailed it.
So yeah, I nailed it. And I became his right-hand man.
Yeah.
And of course, as you know, he ended up moving me into his house, and he fathered me, for the next 3 years of my life.
Well, I love that because that's the way God shows up sometimes, right? And you never know. And the other thing too is you had, and he, for some reason, he figured you could do it, and put you on this machine, and you did it. And I love that because, it's good to have certain amount of fear. It's good to have fear in certain ways, but also sometimes fear will kill things too. And when it's coming from the enemy, and we have natural fight or flight in our bodies, right? God put that in there. If all of a sudden you see, a big bear coming at you, you need to do something about it. You're not going to go sit there and, crack open a 6-pack and have a beer with the bear. No, you got to take care of yourself. So there's that, but there's also this thing that you have and what God blesses us with. And I believe that entrepreneurs have this is that, hey, yes is an answer. Yes, I can do this. Yes. And by you doing that, yes, and by that guy giving you a shot, he probably knew, I don't know if he was a believer or not, but he knew that you could probably figure this thing out because of your intelligence and your possibilities of just making something happen, which you did. So, which I love that story. And I think the whole thing, your whole life is a made for movie deal. I mean, it truly is. And, I can't wait to see the book. And so, all right, so let me take our audience here because I'm going to skip a few things. But you eventually start your own landscaping side business in Georgia and was very, very successful at that. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And you were doing famous houses and stuff. Your business got very lucrative and you did really, really well. You employed a lot of people. And then you decided to move to Texas and then you sold the company, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so you made a whole bunch of money, became a millionaire, and got started in the stock market. Why don't you share about that if you can?
Yeah. So running a service business was really tough, right? Like for me, it was the only way. I had no college degree. I mean, couldn't climb a ladder in the corporate world. So just doing construction, doing services was my path. That path was hard. Over 10 years, yes, I made a lot of money, but still broken in many ways. On the road all the time, in your truck all the time. And a lot of service guys can relate to this. So you're eating bad. As an entrepreneur, you're working 24 hours. So my marriage suffered, my health suffered, my parenting suffered, everything else suffered except my bank account. Right. And so by the time I sold that business, I was done with the service industry. Like I saw no path for me. I looked at selling my business as the great escape. I mean, because I prayed earnestly for the last 5 years of that business to say, God, deliver me from this industry. It's killing me. It's killing my soul. So I got the money, right? And then it just so happened to be, COVID happens. I was having it managed by like a wealth manager. And I've always had this ability to kind of see into the future a little bit. And like, a lot of people call it a lot of different things, but I think it's just like, for me, I pick up on data because I'm very hypersensitive, and it's a gift, from God. So I kind of can see the writing on the wall sometimes months in advance. And so I knew that we were going to have a major stock market decline. We had been running up for so long. This was just the perfect storm to send it downward. And so I called my money manager, and we're still great friends to this day, but he was like, talk me off the cliff. He's like, we're not going to sell it. So I got off the phone. I was like, wait, I prayed about it. I'm like, no, we need to sell everything. We need to, sell it all. So I called the trade desk, had them liquidate everything, had the money transferred to me, which that was risky, right? Because now could possibly be ruining a friendship. And so then I took over my account and just began this whole new look of like looking at the markets. It was something I was always interested in. And sure enough, like the big drop came. I kind of wobbled a little bit at the bottom, but overall bought some really great positions, and then was able to 4 to 5x that money, that million and so dollars. So then I was able to bring that up to $4 or $5 million. And that became like the new path, right? Because in my own ego, I was like, I'm the man. This is my new way of life. And so I began to like, I'm going to create a, big capital company, and I'm going to be a money manager. I'm going to, go to the office, wear a suit and tie, and pull up in my Ferrari every day. You were around me at that time. So this became like,
I remember.
Yeah. It's like, I wanted a new lane. I wasn't satisfied with the path that God had brought me up for the, first 30 years. I wanted to create a new path for the next 30 years of my life. And, and that ended in some different ways, as well.
Yeah.
But I learned from it.
Yeah, you did. And what I love about that story, though, Eric, and what you walked through is you're not, excuse me, you're not the only one that's been through that situation. I've been through similar situations too. And, as an entrepreneur, we're risk takers. Yeah. And so when you saw that opportunity and the market tanked during COVID, you thought, well, I'll come in here, I'll research and buy something, which you did real well. But you did one of the biggest things that I've learned, costly as you have too. You fall in love with a stock.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it's the worst thing. I did that with Disney. I fell in love with Disney back in the day. And, I had, I don't know, almost $1,300,000 worth of Disney stock. And on 9/11, that kind of tanked, and, I lost $750,000 because I was hanging on too long, and I kept thinking, because I loved Disney. We'd take our kids always there. And so I remember you sharing your story too on that. And, but I do also remember that, you got humbled in that situation, which we all been humbled. And I think, like the scripture says, he who exalts himself shall be humbled, right?
Yeah.
And so you lived through that. But what I love about you, Eric, is you came on the other side of that and said, okay, here it is. I repent. You repented. And now you've started something else, and you got back into the business that brought you, and you're going to make this thing nationwide mega business. So go ahead and share that with us.
All right.
Are we back?
Yeah. Do you mind if I share the one tidbit from that that was really important?
Yes.
So here's the deal. I turned $1 million into like 5 million, right? Can you hear me well? I got a note about cool. My internet connection. We're both internet's kind of wacky.
I know. So it's all right. I'll have Darren will fix it all.
Awesome. So I'll tell you what was really interesting and what changed my life is, we talked a little bit about when I was a kid and like all the trauma, and truly on a timeline up until the stock market, and like everything was on an ascent. Like my life had a lot of ups and downs, but overall I was climbing ladders my whole life. And when I reached this point, like when I would open up my phone in the mornings and see $4 or $5 million, considering where I came from, truly in my soul, I had made it. Mm-hmm. I was free. I didn't have to I could have my phone on or off. I was free. I felt free, debt free, first time in my life. And in that moment, I was picturing what was next. And in that next picture, it was 10 million. It was 50 million. It was 100 million. It was Ferraris. It was jets. Like I just knew that if the history of my life was going to speak for me, then it was just going to keep going. But then in that, like you said, I was so in love with my decisions and not, I kind of got locked in and didn't allow myself to go in and out of decisions, like is really good for entrepreneurs, like to just burn the ships at any moment. You have to be willing to burn ships at any moment.
Amen.
And I got stuck, and I watched my accounts go from around 4 to 5 million all the way back down little by little to where we got $1 million. So I ended up burning through probably $3 million before I called a buddy of mine who's a wealth manager, and I called him crying, and I said, I'm addicted. And so we stopped. I brought my wife into it, and we stopped trading. We stopped it. And luckily I did it in a good time, right? My house was still paid off. Like, I didn't have near that much money in the bank. I had started some other things, which we're going to talk about. But here's what's crazy. And this is what changed my life. It'd probably be the greatest lesson in my life moving forward. I was more broken in my soul about losing that money than anything else up to that point. And I've done some bad stuff. Like, I have a pretty rough past. And that right there told me that my heart was in the wrong place.
Good.
When losing money affects you more than almost losing your marriage or being arrested or being on drugs or alcohol, whatever it is, I had a serious problem, an identity issue with money. And it took me almost a year to navigate that. And it was pain every day to restructure my spirit, my mind about that. And so thank God in that time frame of me, and this is the Lord, like even when we're in the deepest mess and we don't even know it, he's like orchestrating your rebound, right? He's like, he already has the plan for you, and he's already working on it. You're already working on it. You're just you don't even know it exists. Right. And so, of course, I went to Kilimanjaro and I learned a lot, and that may be for another podcast about God. And in short, God showed me as I climbed that mountain that in life as a Christian, being acclimated, just like when you climb a mountain, is extremely important. Because the truth is, I can honestly say this, my wife knows this. If I would have went from 4 million to 10 to 100, right now, I'd probably be divorced. I'd have, I'd be in a Ferrari, and I would be this close to destruction. And I'm not saying Ferraris and $100 million is bad, because I want all that stuff. Sure. But for me, I was becoming so reliant on my balances that Jesus became a very far idea from my mind.
Yeah. And that's so good, Eric. And I love you sharing that story with us, because listen, as an entrepreneur, sometimes we identify more with our business card and our bank accounts than we do with Jesus. And we find our identity in it, especially those that have success. Yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
And so, what you're saying is really good, because it's okay to have $100 million. It's okay to have a Ferrari. It's okay to have private jets. It is, but it's not okay to worship that. It's not okay to idolize that. It's not okay to love that more than you love Jesus, more than you love your wife.
And he'll acclimate you. Like, there's some Christians who truly have their heart's pretty solid, and they don't, a lot of people judge people that have a lot, especially Christians, right? Like rich pastors and stuff like that. But you have no idea. They may have their addiction might be peanut butter. Like they have maybe zero addictions. Right. What they do behind closed doors is so solid that they can be entrusted with so much. And when you have a past and a history of trauma, like I have an addiction, it's very easy for me to fall off. And a good father truly is not going to give me something that's going to destroy me. Doesn't mean I can't have it. It just means there's going to be an acclimation process. There's going to be a process in my life.
Yeah. And accountability on that. And I love that, Eric. And I think that's such wise words. So, all right. So, because we could go into that whole deal just in Mount Kilimanjaro. That's a whole book in itself, which is a beautiful story. All right. But I want to get it. You got this business back again. You started another business, another nationwide side business, which is blowing up. And tell me about what Click Done is doing. Tell me about that, because I find this fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got hit by vision from the Lord during the time I was at the peak of my stock trading. I was in this office downtown, and every morning I would go into this office. I look at my balance, I'd figure out what was going on, and then I started playing with other ideas. And I for about 2 weeks straight, I was getting hit by the Lord. I'd go in there and I'd turn on an upper room prayer set, and I would listen and I would just pray, and I started getting hit with crazy vision. And one of the things that initiated this was the pain that I went through in the service industry. And we would implement technology here and there, right? Like better systems for quoting and estimating, and better systems for routing trucks. And so there is a lot of technology available. But one thing that I knew was probably one of the most painful things about a service industry is like going out and getting the jobs and then doing the job. So there's always this flux back and forth of like trying to get work and then performing the work, sales and fulfillment. Product industry has been automated for quite some time. Jeff Bezos and Amazon have perfected this process. It's like online website, you search, you can find pretty much anything you're looking for. And in a warehouse near you somewhere is that item. And there's a whole bunch of mechanisms that can get that to you quickly. You essentially get online, you see it, you're able to look at reviews, you see the pictures, and it speaks to you, right? It's like a virtual store. And so I understood, and especially during COVID, when we were getting pretty much everything shipped to our doors. And of course, we were big Uber Eats and DoorDash fans. In the modern world, we don't cook a lot. And I mean, almost breakfast, lunch, and dinner we're having delivered, and it got better and better. And I watched as Uber Eats and DoorDash, the app got better and better over that year, where, I mean, I could see exactly what I was going to eat, and I could, add this and, just to track that, create my order. And I'm like, wait a second, there's got to be a way to do this with the sod industry. And so I always knew my prices. I knew we had products. Some people just want to buy the product and then we deliver it. We're kind of the middleman. And I also knew a lot of our business was installations, probably 90% of it. And I knew my prices. I know what it costs. And sure, right, there's a paradigm there of like a lot of contractors want to go out and look at the job, but a lot of stuff can be done, with the satellite imagery now and Google Maps. And truly, if you know your business, like the price variances, and they're not that much. And so I was like, if I had a website, like an e-commerce store that could sell sod and the installation and give my customer options, like I could automate my sales process and quit sending a sales guy driving 300 miles a day in a company truck around town doing estimates and doing it the old school way. So, dude, like this is crazy, but I got hit with this whole vision of this thing. And then I went out to build it. Well, I couldn't do it on Shopify. I couldn't do it on Wix. I couldn't do it on Squarespace. I couldn't do it on all, and I'm not going to go into a lot of the details on this call why, but all these platforms were set up in the beginning and still run in the lane of product-based businesses. So I had a problem, and through a couple miracles, which I mean, I'm talking acts of God, I got a beta software created for this idea I had. So essentially the business that this year is tracking to do anywhere, I mean, minimum 5 million, but could easily do 15 to 20 million. Of course, that's what we're busy with right now. I'm looking right here at a Slack screen of all the orders coming in today. And that company came through that beta software. The idea I got, the beta software that got made through a miracle. And this was just 2.5 years ago. Last year was our first full year in business. Only one person ran the thing on the phone from their home office. And we did 1.7 million last year. Right now we're at like 994%. So like a 9.5x increase. And so in that though, the Lord said one thing, because you know what I was tempted to do, right, Michael? I was like, okay, I'm going to be the Amazon of home services. And I can do that. Like, I could do that, but it was almost like the fear of the Lord. I kind of saw into the future of me building this business. And one of the steps of that business plan would be a lot of M&A, a lot of me going into cities and buying up existing businesses. So we're talking HVAC companies, plumbing companies, electrical companies, landscape companies, garage door companies, and so on. If I'm going to be the Amazon of home services, I'm going to be buying up all these businesses across the nation. And then I remembered the pain I went through selling my company. And I remember that it wasn't necessarily a great thing that I sold my company, right? Because on paper, it would have been better. We talked about this before. If I kept my company, I just couldn't emotionally handle it. So I felt like the Lord was like, Eric, no, you're going to build the software. You're going to teach people how to do what you're doing now with the sod industry. You're going to empower every business out there, not just in America, in the world, how to automate their sales process, because things have changed a lot. And you can watch CNBC all day long, and they're going to mention about all the sticky points, like, the jobs and the inflation and all this stuff. But I don't think people really understand. And this is the point right here. I don't think anybody's getting this, because it's got to be received by revelation. We're entering into a new world where dreams, hopes, all the things that made me and you start businesses as young people, all those things are being done digitally now. Our dopamine, our all the things that bring us joy, they're creating falsehoods in our phone. We can have relationships on our phone. We can play video games and build empires on our phone. We can pretty much get those same feelings through our phone. And it's destroying our world. The very technology that's empowering our world is slowly destroying our world.
It's true.
So I thought back to Acts, and I thought about when Jesus was gone finally, and they were all in one place, in one accord, one heart. And the Bible says this, that no one was without. And I think back about the old economy. I think back when, if you needed meat, there was a butcher in town. If you needed milk, there was the milkman. And everyone, I get it. We have to have dollars and Bitcoin and all these things. But I think that there's been a giant veil created that's made this massive separation between the upper class and the lower class.
True.
And I believe that we're in a time when veils are being torn, when transparency is ruling the day. And it's just all God, right? He's just healing. And that's what ClickDone's about. We're building software that is we're going to put it in the hands of anybody. And I'm talking about, you could just be a dog walker, and we're going to give, you're going to be a sole proprietor. You're going to walk dogs for a living. That brings you great joy. But we're going to give you technology that allows you to minutize your whole range of services. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm a dog walker, I'm going to charge more for walking a Rottweiler than I am a Shih Tzu.
Yes.
And
yes.
And if I can minutize this, and then someone comes to me and says, hey, can I get on your calendar? Yeah, man, just go to my website. But here's the deal. They're going to go to the website and they're going to book the whole thing. They're going to pay for it. And then it's going to be on your calendar. And then you just wake up every morning and do. We just do. It's not like the old days where you can just pay employees more money and they work harder. No, people want relationship. The only way you're going to get people to work harder is through relationship. It's through being a father, through being a mother. You can't build corporations anymore by just paying people more money. That concept of more money doesn't matter anymore.
No, it doesn't. The paradigm has changed. And, as you're describing this whole ClickDone and what you've done, discovered through revelation from the Lord, it's really inspiring, Eric, because people are listening right now thinking, man, this is, this should have been invented a long time ago, right? And you've stepped out and you've done this and you've got this thing going. And I really, truly believe that listeners listen to this, that, you'll be seeing Eric probably on TV and in magazines in this process. Because this guy, I remember Stacy and I were sitting outside with Sarah and Eric a few years ago. And Stacy said, he's crazy enough to be the next billionaire in our tribe, and she said that as a compliment, because you are very, very intelligent, and you do have this crazy genius stuff about you. What I like is you see things, Eric, and you just go out and create it and figure it out and do it. And it's not a direct hockey stick. Like you said, you always have been on an ascent, but you've also had some valleys to go through in that process. And I just want you to know, man, I'm proud of you. I love what you're doing. I love the way you and Sarah, parent your children, and you stand out there and you do what you have to do to make it happen. So, because obviously we're going to need another next podcast to talk more about this stuff and get into Mount Kilimanjaro too, because I really want the audience to get into that. So, but before I say goodbye to you, I want to ask you two things, which I ask everybody. First of all, what scripture are you sitting on right now as such a successful entrepreneur, a great husband almost all the time? I know there's some down times, but a good father and this creative genius that God's blessed you with. What scripture are you sitting on? And what books, if any, are you reading right now that might be interesting to the audience, Eric?
Absolutely. So scripture, I would say, I think it's John 15:5. And that's like the vine and the branches. And I think I've at a point in my life where I just realized that I can't do any of this without being attached. And I was reminded my first mentor in an old church I was at in my young 20s made me this massive like fireplace mantle that he carved with that verse in it. And so I just pulled that out of all the unpacking stuff, and I actually never displayed it. Like he made it for me years ago, and so there's a bar down here in my basement, and the previous owner had massive things of alcohol on the bar. And of course it's tempting. You get a bar, like, oh, I got to fill up the bar. But I decided as an act of faith, like I'm going to put that mantelpiece on the bar.
Come on, bro.
And so that's what I do. So we're right out here in the kitchen. It's like, there's
John
that
15.
thing. Yeah. John 15. So yeah, that is something that's going to be very important for me.
It's good.
And the second question you asked again was
books.
Books. So I'm a big believer in when God's really running with you with vision, to be very careful about relying on outside information, including books. I think they're great. I think mentorship is great, but when you're really called to be a forerunner, I think I'm not reading any books right now, but if I could recommend one to everybody, it would be 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. And the book 0 to 1, it just talks about creating new things. And we're in a time where it's not about necessarily adding onto things that are working. It's about being open enough and crazy enough to build something completely new, to get a new idea. Like God's doing new things. And every monopoly, everyone remember this, every monopoly dies at some point. And it's usually, most people don't start something because they're like, oh, it's already been done, or I'm too late to the game, right? Because people, they come up with this thing. It's like, oh, you got to be first, right? It's not true, actually. Almost every monopoly in history was replaced by the last one to the market. Everyone got ate up all the way through the 20 years of this certain monopoly, or 50 years. But it was that last person who was in the right place at the right time with the new idea. Just as the monopoly got too big for themselves, it was the new idea that came in and took it over. So 0 to 1 walks through that really well by Peter Thiel.
Sounds great. I love that. And who was the author?
Peter Thiel.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, awesome. Large investor, founder of Palantir and PayPal.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty good. It's a pretty good book to read, I'm sure. Very impressive, man. I got to tell you, Eric, I thank you. I know we only scratched the scratch, man. There's so much more. And like I said, when you came to MBA, you blew away the crowd. And it was a beautiful thing. And you're sharing your heart and your ups and downs. Because look, being an entrepreneur, it's not easy. A lot of times people see successful entrepreneurs and they think, oh man, they're an overnight success. Not. It's a difficult thing, but it's a rewarding thing. And you are the epitome of that award and going through that, success, failure, success. And I think it's really inspiring. And so, so Eric, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, look at your deal, or how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So 2 things. Number 1, I also want to clarify that God's worked miracles with my parents. I always tell my story, but I always want to make sure I get in there that both my parents love Jesus now, and they're both in my life, and they're both amazing.
Come on, man. I love that.
My dad's upstairs helping my wife right now.
I love it.
My mom called me yesterday talking about God, and she's just filled with the Holy Spirit. So God restores everything. So that's
Amen.
number one. Number two, click done. My developers say it's going to be live V1 on Monday. Now,
Yes!
so this is amazing news. I'm not going to be advertising it until we work through it. And
Okay.
I'm going to be onboarding some companies.
Okay.
But I would say I try not to be on social too much. I do have an Instagram out there. I do like Twitter. So I am on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. And of course, LinkedIn. And of course, Eric Vevang. I think I'm the only one in the world, except for some that spell it with K because it's a Norwegian name. So there's some Norwegian Vangs. But LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. And then of course the Click Done site. Right now it's like very simple. It's just a get update button, but within the coming week or two, it's actually going to be able to take you into the plans and pricing page where you're going to be able to buy. You're going to have access and you're going to be able to build your own business. And I'm going to start having a training video on there, like a university, and this thing's going to blow up really fast. So just follow along. And
well, by the time this comes out, it'll be out. Excuse me. I'm sorry. So this is going to come out the end of March, 1st of April. And so is it clickdone.com?
Yeah, just like it's spelled right there. It's just clickdone.com. And the other business is localsodfarm.com. That's kind of the parent company of all the sod companies. So if anybody needs sod, obviously we're in 51 major cities across the United States.
I got to talk to you about some more of that myself. All right, let me spell this for those that aren't watching this because I want to spell this for those listeners. It's